The high desert of Wyoming in 1887 was an unforgiving cathedral of stone, sage, and silence. The wind moved through the valley like a preacher without mercy, delivering its sermon of hardship beneath a sky bleached white by relentless sun. In a shallow, lonely basin the Ute called Vitupi, the valley of the dry river, Elias Thorne had carved out a kingdom that was humble, stubborn, and entirely his own. The rocking tea ranch was no empire. It was a weathered cabin of peeled pine logs, a corral patched with sweat and wire, a well that tasted faintly of alkali, and 100 head of longhorns that were as tough and mule-minded as the land they fed on. But it was home, and Elias was carved from the same raw stuff as that hard country. His face was a map of squint lines and sunburn, his hands stiff with calluses so old they felt like part of his bone. His life was simple, up before dawn, checking cattle, watching the sun drown itself behind the Tetons each evening. Simple, and peaceful. But peace in the West was always a fragile thing. He saw the dust cloud first. A faint smudge on the horizon, too concentrated to be wind, too purposeful to be weather. He stepped onto his porch, one hand resting near his Sharps rifle leaning against the doorjamb. A cold dread collected behind his ribs like storm water. As the dust plume drew closer, 3 silhouettes emerged, hard angles of men on leathered horses. Their movements were hungry. Predatory. Elias knew them long before their faces cleared the haze. The Cutler brothers. Jedediah, Micah, and Levi, 3 names whispered across territories like a curse. They drifted like a plague, leaving behind burned homesteads, vanished families, and unmarked graves that the prairie grass swallowed whole. The brothers reined up before Elias's porch with no greeting, no smile, only a stillness sharper than any drawn gun. Jedediah, the eldest, a giant of a man with a thornbush beard and shotgun-cold eyes, spat into the dust. "Thorne," he growled, voice like gravel under iron wheels. "We're here to discuss water rights." Elias met his stare. "Water rights are settled. This land's deeded. My cattle drink from the creek. Nothing to talk over." Jedediah smiled, a slow, ugly curl that never touched his eyes. "You're mistaken. Law out east don't matter a damn out here. Out here, a man owns what he can hold. And we aim to hold this valley." A long silence settled, thick, tense, electric. A duel without pistols. Elias stood his ground, but he saw the truth in Jedediah's gaze. They weren't bargaining. They were warning. The brothers turned their horses after a long, hungry look over the homestead. It was not a farewell. It was a promise. A declaration of war made without a single shouted threat. That night Elias slept lightly, rifle across his lap, the memory of Jedediah's dead eyes burning in his mind. The storm wasn't coming anymore. It was here. Days passed. Long, thin days stretched tight with tension. Elias worked with one hand on his pistol grip, ears pricked for hooves. He sent his hired hand, a young Paiute boy named Little Fox, away into the mountains to stay with family. He wouldn't risk an innocent. Then, one dawn, the silence woke him, an unnatural, suffocating hush. No cattle lowing. He stepped outside and froze. They were all there. Every last one of his longhorns. But they were still, dark shapes sprawled across the dewy grass like fallen boulders. The Cutlers hadn't stolen them. They had poisoned the water hole with loco weed and arsenic. His herd, his livelihood, was gone. One brutal stroke meant to break him. The shock hit him like a hammer. His knees buckled, grief hollowed his chest. This wasn't about land. This was extermination. A message written in suffering. But grief cooled. Hardened. Became something metal. By midday he was digging a mass grave, each heave of the shovel a promise, each drop of sweat a vow. When he finished, he cleaned his Sharps rifle until it gleamed, honed his skinning knife to a razor's edge, and steeled his soul for the darkness ahead. The rancher was gone. In his place stood a man shaped into an instrument of vengeance. The Cutlers were holed up in a box canyon a day's ride south, a place the tribes avoided, calling it cursed ground. Elias set out under a moon washed white against the desert floor, moving silent as a drifting shadow. He left his horse a mile out and went the rest on foot, slipping through juniper and stone with the grace of a hunter born. From a ridge he watched them through a spyglass. Their fire glowed like a blasphemous eye in the night. Laughter echoed cruelly off the canyon walls. Whiskey bottles clinked. They felt untouchable. They were wrong. At the canyon mouth, the only easy way out, he found Micah on first watch, humming to himself. Elias moved behind him like a whisper. An arm locked around Micah's throat, a brief struggle, a muffled snap. Silence. Elias dragged the body into the shadows and arranged it as a grotesque warning at the canyon entrance, a statement carved in death. Then he vanished into the rocks. The first scream tore through the pre-dawn gloom. Levi had found what remained of his brother. Panic shot through the camp. Men grabbed rifles with shaking hands. Jedediah bellowed orders, but even he couldn't hide the tremor in his voice. This wasn't a skirmish. This was a hunt. Elias fired a single shot from high above, clean, precise. He didn't aim at a man, he shattered the whiskey bottle in Levi's hand. The explosion of glass and liquor sent Levi into a frenzy. He bolted for the horses, screaming curses. Elias's second shot ended the run. Levi collapsed face first into the dirt, a dark stain spreading beneath him. Only Jedediah remained. The giant paced like a trapped wolf, eyes wild, firing at shadows that weren't there. "Show yourself, Thorne!" he roared. "Face me like a man." And Elias did. As the first rim of dawn spilled over the canyon walls, he stepped into the open, tall, calm, silent. The look in his eyes froze Jedediah where he stood. The outlaw fumbled to reload, hands shaking, breath ragged. Elias closed the distance slowly, knife in hand. The fight that followed wasn't a duel. It was an ending, a brutal, inevitable punctuation to a story written in violence. When it was done, Jedediah fell in the dust beside his brothers, and Elias stood over him, breathing hard, the morning light glinting off the blood on his blade. He felt no triumph. No joy. Only an empty, echoing quiet. He had defended his land, but a piece of him had died in that canyon, buried beside the Cutlers. As the sun rose behind him, Elias Thorne walked out of the canyon. Not as a rancher. Not as a simple man of cattle and soil. But as a legend, a dark whisper that would echo across campfires and saloons for generations. A reminder that on the frontier, justice was often won not by the law, but by the cold, bloody hand of a man with nothing left to lose.